Sunny skies and high temperatures will climb to around 43 with southwest winds gusting to 28. Periods of rain developing in the overnight hours, with the snow will flow back close to 30 by the evening, other 35 flying into the upper 20s. Partly sunny 35 with Sunday. See Pilot Area Junior Morning 1460 WVOX, the Whitney Global Media Station. Thank you for joining us on 1460 WVOX, America's great community radio station where many different voices are heard in the land. Opinions expressed in our community and open line programs are not necessarily those of the station, its management, or sponsors. As always, we're privileged to amplify the voice of the people here on Vox Populi 1460 and worldwide at WVOX.com for you and yours. It's your mornings. Favorite morning team, Dennis and Connie, and Good Morning Westchester, weekday mornings from 6 to 9, right here on 1460 WVOX. 1460. Stay tuned now for What Happened Here with Rich Thomas. Rich Thomas is the former mayor of Mount Vernon. And what happened here with Rich Thomas on 1460 WVOX.
Talking about the Manhattan DA today. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I'm Rich Thomas. You're listening to WVOX at Whitney Global Media Station, the station of the nation. I'm so happy to be back on 1460 AM radio. Listen, today you're listening to What Happened Here with the Manhattan DA, hosted by Mayor Richard Thomas, former mayor of the city of Mount Vernon. You're welcome to call in at 914-636-0110. And today we have a guest who is a former AUSA from the Eastern District, a former ADA from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, also a person who served as former City Inspector General for the city of Mount Vernon when I was in office as mayor. But I can tell you right now, we are about to hear from Charles Knapp, someone that has a wealth of experience, great ideas, but someone that has really contributed to making sure that justice is served properly, not just in the courtroom, but also in the realms of education and academia and throughout. But before we get to Mr. Knapp and before we get into the Manhattan DA, we're going to hear from Mr. Knapp. He's going to tell us a little bit about his background, and we're going to get into discussing the Manhattan District Attorney. Mr. Knapp, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of What Happened Here. You have some thoughts on the Manhattan District Attorney. I recently saw that you had some comments published in the New York Times.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's always good to see you.
Same.
Yes, of course I have some thoughts on things. I try to stay informed. I have opinions, and of course they're just my opinions. But I was first an assistant district attorney in Manhattan in 1980 under Mr. Morgenthau, who everybody, I think, knows of his reputation. He was one of the great civil servants, servants of the people for decades at that prosecutor's office. It's a very special office. It's one of the premier offices in the United States, frankly. But it's part of a larger system. And I'll explain what I mean by that. But I just want to mention from my personal experience, when I was there, I was in the Appeals Bureau and then I was in the Trial Bureau. And the way I looked at the job was that the prosecutor is really the first line in civil liberties defense, in that it's up to the prosecutor to decide what charges are going to be filed. He or she has to analyze the evidence brought by the police officers, and it's not the way you see it on television at all. It's a much more deliberative process.
Is that right?
It's supposed to be. Now, of course, there are all types of personalities who want to be prosecutors, but the best of the best take the job very seriously. Do not play politics, try to analyze the evidence and decide what the appropriate charges are.
So you went from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to the Eastern District, the AU, the Department of Justice. Can you tell us about that transition?
Yeah, after about 5 years at the district attorney's office, if you take the job seriously, you run the risk of tunnel vision, in that all you see day in, day out are bad things happening to people. And you have to be very careful not to let that seep into your psyche and think the world is bad. The world is divided between the bad guys and the innocent people, and you're on some sort of crusade. You have to guard against that, and it takes a psychological toll, I think. And so I decided after 5 years to go to the United States Attorney's Office, but in the civil division, not criminal.
Well, that brings up a good question because, like, I'm thinking about January 6th. There are so many people that think January 6th is, some people characterize it as a protest, some people characterize it as an insurrection. We have, members of Congress investigating the issue, but it seems to be always this tug of war on where January 6th falls. But I do, want to touch upon that when we come back from break because there were some new subpoenas issued for Rudy Giuliani and a few of the other members of the Trump team. And I'm just curious as to, what your thoughts are in terms of, their approach to looking for facts to act on, I guess, for January 6th, because it doesn't seem to have an end in sight. It just seems to be this, constant conversation without real action.
Sure.
But looking at the trajectory from the AUSA office, what were some of the things in the civil division that you worked on?
I actually worked on one of the few Voting Rights Act cases. I was, I think, the only assistant there during my 4.5 years that showed up in front of a 3-judge panel because that's the way certain Voting Rights Act cases are dealt with at the trial level. It was a special process. And other than that, I defended every federal agency and every federal employee in civil court.
Well, this is a big question that's being asked right now. We just had Martin Luther King Day. We heard from President Biden on the topic of voting, but it seems too little, too late. I mean, I just can't understand what happened going into after 1 year in office, more than 50 years in Washington, that all of a sudden voting act is a priority of the administration. It just seems like some kind of attempt to just try and distract from, I guess, some other stalled agendas at this point.
Well, it's politics, obviously, but it seems to me that the Democrats have historically made a poor decision, which I think they're playing catch up now, and that's if you want power through the ballot box, you have to organize. You can't lay everything on the court system or the politicians. So you have people like Stacey Abrams in Georgia, who did the legwork to get out the vote, to get people interested, to make sure they could get to the ballot boxes, even if they were restricted. And that bore fruit. And I think that that's what the Democrats have to do nationwide, because at the moment Congress is in gridlock, as we see.
Well, Congress remains in gridlock for a variety of reasons, and one of the reasons is that it seems that our members of Congress only focused on either getting reelected or just pandering to TV ratings. They don't seem to be following up on the substantive issues. Last week we had Congressman Elliot Engel on. I expect to have a few more congressmen on in the coming weeks to talk about the issue and the disconnect between Congress and the community. But these are things that we'll get into when we ask what happened here on different topics. But today we're going to be visiting January 6th. We're going to talk about the Manhattan DA, which is a big ticket item, big concerns. Right now, the mayor of New York City, new mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, is discussing how people in New York City do not feel safe. And as I mentioned earlier on when I was talking with Dennis and Tony on the morning show. While many of us live in Westchester, many of us do work in New York City, so we do have to deal with the situations that are unfolding there, and it's not right that crime is out of control in New York City, and it's really concerning that the Manhattan District Attorney has taken a sharp left turn, giving a signal to criminals that they can go ahead and mug people and rob them and not have to face any real prosecution. And Charlie Knapp will be discussing that as a former Manhattan District Attorney himself, and someone that has seen quite a bit over the years in his work, ranging from Mount Vernon to the Eastern District for the Civil Division of the Department of Justice. And as you already know, the DOJ is in Mount Vernon. They're looking at the police department. That's something that I'd like to get your thoughts on, because it's interesting to see finally some transparency coming out, and I hope that more transparency continues to unfold. But we're going to hold that dial. You're listening to What Happened Here with Mayor Rich Thomas. Don't change that dial. So everybody that's at home, we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. They get to hang out with us over the break. So everybody just hang in there, lob your questions. If you're on Facebook and YouTube, I do not see your questions yet, but when they do pop up, I definitely will do my best to answer them. I will say that I need you guys to definitely share the show, encourage people to tag in and tap in, but also feel free to call into the show. And the phone number is 914-636-0110. Again, that's 914-636-0110. So we'll be back after this break. So, telling you, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
How much time? Give me on for now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it's too much money. Time flies.
It definitely does. And that first break is they don't start the show until like 12:10.
Yeah, nice.
So that's kind of what happens. But
Yeah.
but I mean, there's a lot to cover.
What he was gonna pick up with first, the DA or January 6th?
With the DA. Because I think people need to understand, the severity of the signal that's been sent. You can go and rob everything, and unless you kill somebody, you're not going to be prosecuted. And that's a terrible signal to send.
When push comes to shove, I don't think he's gonna be doing that. Or violence, I think, is separate.
Let's see what does. Carlman.
Where's Rich Thomas, the former mayor of Mount Vernon, on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. You're listening to WVOX, a Whitney Global Media station, a station for the nation. We're here every Wednesday at noon. You're listening to 1460 on your AM dial or worldwide at WVOX.com. You're listening to What Happened Here. Today we're questioning what happened here with the Manhattan DA. I'm Rich Thomas, the former mayor of Mount Vernon. You can call into the show at 914-636-0110. We will also talk about January 6th and what's going on with the investigation there. Vince, I know you're listening, so we have some questions to go through, so get ready to call. But we do have a guest in the studio, a guest by the name of Charles Knapp. Charles Knapp is a former AUSA from the Eastern District, former Manhattan ADA, and also served as Inspector General for the city of Mount Vernon. Mr. Knapp, What happened? It feels like, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is literally sleeping on trying to keep New Yorkers safe. We just heard from Eric Adams, Mayor of New York City, explain that New Yorkers certainly don't feel safe on the subways. They feel threatened even going to Burger King. God bless that young lady that lost her life because some maniac went in to try and get vengeance or whatever he decided to do. But obviously there are huge issues with crime, and the Manhattan District Attorney laid out a bunch of policies that sent signals to people that feel that, I guess, it's okay to commit crime now. Is that the situation? Can you explain for our listeners?
Well, of course, it's not okay to commit crime. I don't know that DA Bragg meant to send any such signal, but the problem is the district attorney is a cog in a much larger mechanism. And by that I mean his job is to prosecute crime, and the crimes are defined by the laws passed by the legislature. There's whole sentencing issues involved that are created by the legislature that are imposed by the courts, not by the DA. It's not up to the DA to uh, tell the judge what he's going to do. The judge is independent. On the flip side of all that, you have the police department. They're separate. Their job is to arrest people that they have probable cause to believe committed a crime. One of the best bits of advice, by the way, I was given when I started as the Manhattan Assistant District Attorney was the caution that the police officer is not your friend. You treat him as you would any other witness. You don't give him any special credibility just because he's dressed in blue. You always need to remain skeptical of what you're told from whatever source. Now, District Attorney Bragg has set out his policies. Uh, in particular, I'd like to focus for a second on his issues regarding sentencing. Because that's the tell, what he's not going to be asking for jail time, and he promised that he would not ask for sentences exceeding 20 years. The listeners need to know that New York State has what's known as an indeterminate sentence as opposed to the federal practice of definite sentence. The difference is this. In many cases that are felonies, you're sentenced to a range, a minimum and a maximum. It could be 1 to 3, it could be 15 years to life, as opposed to the federal side where it's a 5-year sentence, a 2-year sentence, and that's that. So when District Attorney Bragg says, I'm not going to ask for a sentence of over 20 years, in fact, what he's saying is, I won't ask for a sentence of more than 20 to life because it's not up to him. He just doesn't have the power to do that. And also, dirty little secret of criminal law is 95% or so cases wind up in plea bargains. And the way the plea bargain works in New York is it's really a sentencing bargain. The defendant is basically making a pragmatic decision of how long he wants to serve, and in that sense, the particular crime is not particularly relevant, should I say. And I want to just, on this hypothetical, assume that the person is guilty,
Well,
because that's not always the case either.
and there's a lot of scholarly work done on the matter of plea bargaining and issues that relate to trying to make a deal. There's a federal judge, his name escapes me at this moment, but he wrote a book about how they're
Jed Rakoff.
yes, there it is, Jed Rakoff. He wrote a book on this topic, and he visited the issue of there needs to be stronger guardrails for that for instance, because most people cannot afford an attorney. Most people cannot afford the ability to defend themselves, which is why even when you're innocent, you find yourself in a very tough predicament because you can't afford to defend. So that's something that, I'll try and reach out to him, see if I can get him on the show to discuss the topic. I participated in a discussion with him and NYU a few months ago, and it was just an amazing discussion. And speaking of NYU, I know they have a conversation coming up with Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor, so it might be a great topic to listen in on, and I'm gonna figure out what the parameters are, but it's going to be very insightful to ask questions about or hear her perspective on matters, especially now that the Democrats are in a minority on the Supreme Court bench, and with issues like, let's say, January 6th and in the matter of the president and his executive privilege. Like, what is, what's the limit of that, and how will that be handled as it approaches the Supreme Court? We've seen recently the Supreme Court shoot down the Biden administration's requirement for businesses to have employees vaccinated. That's definitely a signal that the Supreme Court is not in lockstep with the president. Surprise, surprise. But it definitely sent a signal that the Supreme Court is not afraid to make some decisions that they believe are right for not just their bench, but I guess our country. So in looking at this coming back to Manhattan, one of the questions is, is it a monetary thing? Is it for the policy of the Manhattan DA to say, unless you really harm somebody, you're not going to be prosecuted to the extent that you normally would have been prosecuted? But that's a question that we'll explore when we come back. You're listening to WVOX 1460 AM. Don't change that dial from what happened here. Yeah, that's the question is, what are the ramifications?
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna finish the plea bargain
Yeah.
concept, because that'll flow right into it. Because as I mentioned to you, it's really sentence bargaining,
Okay.
and then it's up to the judge to say yay or nay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's the other issue. Right, we may not be able to think everything, and then have to come back next month.
Looking forward to it. I can tell you right now that there's a big question about, what else is the DOJ doing in Mount Vernon? Because it's just not only quiet, but it's astonishing. I have some records I can show you.
Well, theoretically, shouldn't know what they're up to. I mean, no one should know what they're up to. And that's part of the January 6th thing, if we get into it. Difference between Congress and DOJ. Two separate things.
That's the thing
That people don't quite understand.
Yes, we have to unpack that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a good distinction, is that the DOJ is on a totally different timeline. They did indict the Oath Keepers.
Yeah, but I mean, we'll get into that. But it's just, they operate differently.
Correct. Much different.
They have to. If they better.
I do find this,
nation's top doctors, the latest technology and advanced treatments.
I find it a bit unnerving that the AG in New York is,
That's different.
going after Trump and looking at all the financials. Meanwhile, you got a city like Mount Vernon that has not published its financials since 2016. And it's like we have an entire economy from your state to.
Oh, but
This is so
controllers, the state controllers,
Activities delayed or canceled when snow.
the AG doesn't do anything without a criminal.
These announcements.
Yeah, I know, right?
Information everyone in Westchester needs to hear about right here on 1460 AM. Official all.
Well, see what we can do, but
Informational storm announcements, and they are being made possible through the generosity of New Rochelle Chevrolet at 291 Main Street, right here in New Rochelle. New Rochelle Chevrolet is superb.
Say, sir, I can still hear you.
So right next to you, there's a knob. No, there's a knob. You turn the volume.
Know that Westchester
It's supposed to.
the best.
No, because I think I can just hear you
You can
from here.
but for some reason, I don't know what it is on radio. It works
Chevrolet,
Okay.
informing you as to what is closed on those snowy winter days.
Background
Because
noise
they
and
have been
sound.
named exclusive sponsor of WVOX's Storm Alert. Thank you, New Rochelle Chevrolet, for bringing these reports to the WVOX listeners.
And with your latest up-to-date forecast, this commentary is high in the weather on 1460 WVOX.
Forecast Westchester County in the vicinity for today. We'll see partly sunny skies. Our high temperatures climb to around 43, with southwest winds gusting to 28. Periods of rain developing through the overnight hours, taking over the snow into the lower 30s. Rain or snow early Thursday. Chance of snow through the midday hours, about 1 to 3 inches possible before it ends. Temperatures will fall back close to 30 by the evening hours. Mostly sunny on Friday. Friday's highs will be climbing into the lower 20s. 30% chance of light snow or flurries on Saturday. Other highs climbing into the upper 20s. Partly sunny, 35 on Sunday. Meteorological area Junior Point 1460 WVOX, Whitney Global Media Station.
Everything you need to get started in the morning.
Every morning.
Good morning, Westchester. Pass the time. In mornings from 6 to 9, right here on 1460 WVOX. And now back to What Happened Here with Rich Thomas, the former mayor of Mount Vernon, on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. You're listening to WVOX, a Whitney Global Media station. You're listening to What Happened Here, hosted by Rich Thomas, I'm the former mayor of the city of Mount Vernon. We're here every Wednesday at noon. You can listen to us on 1460 on your AM dial or worldwide at WVOX.com. Now, the mission of this program is to ask the question of what happened here, to unpack and explain and visit the what, the how, the who, even the why. But at the end of the conversation, we hope that you leave with an understanding of what actually happened on an issue from January 6th to the Manhattan DA, which we're discussing today. And you know, you can make some good out of the information you receive. If you want to call in, the phone number is 914-636-0110. And before we went to break, we started asking the question, what happened here with the situation on crime in New York City? The Manhattan District Attorney made an announcement on basically his first day in office that there were some crimes that he would just not prosecute, and there were other crimes that he would, you know, seek very light sentencing on because, you know, he felt from a policy standpoint, liberal policy standpoint, it was the right move. Now, there's been a lot of pushback from law enforcement, a lot of pushback from the community, which is rightly concerned about, you know, their safety. And just a moments ago, earlier today, New York City Mayor Eric Adams called for a greater sense of security in the city and what he's going to do to try and beef up and support the police department. The police commissioner of New York City met with the Manhattan District Attorney about the policies after much concern was raised by members of law enforcement. And with us today, we have a guest, Charles Knapp, who's a former AUSA, former Manhattan DA, who also served as Inspector General in the city of Mount Vernon, someone that has a lot of experience and knowledge on these topics. And one of the things he was going to explain before we went to break is, you know, what's the rationale behind trying to, you know, create a lighter, I guess, law enforcement. And we do have a call on the line, but it's going to have that call on hold for 1 second. We just want to have Charlie explain this one answer, and then we're going to pause Charlie to get to our caller. So Charlie, the question before we went to break was, what's up with the light sentencing, the signal to criminals that you can commit crimes?
Well, the sentencing is actually not up to the DA. The sentencing is up to the judge. And what happens, as I started to mention on plea bargaining, in New York, it's really sentencing bargaining. And the reality is the court is informed of the charge that the defendant is going to plead to and the agreed sentence that should be imposed if the court accepts the plea. The judge will always advise the defendant that should there be something in the probation report that prevents him in good conscience from imposing the sentence that was agreed to, the defendant gets his plea back and they go to trial. So two things come from that. One is it's on the judge in terms of sentencing. He's not obligated to agree to any light sentence or non-custodial sentence if the legislative scheme for sentencing calls for some sort of custodial sentence. I'd also like to point out that, again, the dirty little secret is you have 95% of the cases that plead out because the system is simply not set up for trials for everybody. It would shut down. There are not enough judges, there are not enough courtrooms, and then there's this thing, a constitutional right to a speedy trial, and the case law is very clear that it's not subject to some budgetary exception. So if everybody went to trial, the entire system would fall apart. I think DA Bragg knows that, and I think he may just be betting that in most cases, the judges will just go along with the plea bargain and the sentencing that's been offered. But, you know, we will see. Ultimately, sentencing is for the court, not the DA.
Well, we'll definitely see, and we're gonna hear from our first caller. Caller, you're on the line. Hello, good morning, caller. You're on the line. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vince, for calling in, and thanks for participating in the show. Yeah. Sure. Yes.
And I had this same discussion even with Mr. Spaghetti when he was out, and Louis Reagan as well. It was not the purview of the district attorney, I have an opinion, and do not drag it. Kind of act was project or look fine. I don't know the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a district attorney, which I've been never have a practice for reading. I'm doing the great one and the album, is involved in the gun. Whatever is good. We're going to have to do that, and that isn't largely. So when we talk about that, which is in the role of that's true. But you know, the rest of the kind of robbery, which was the more usual. With the middle line, with the maximum 1 year incarceration, to do great. I'd like to hear your comments, Nelly. Do you believe it is within the proper purview of a district attorney who will not put an entire island? This is what I believe is the proper function. You have to tell us with the tell us a district attorney and you for I think this is a lot of abuse of that authority.
I agree with you. The technical term, of course, would be the discretion by the district attorney. And I agree that it's supposed to be a case-by-case basis on the individual facts. It's an abuse of discretion to say, I don't care what the facts are, I'm not going to prosecute this whole type of crime, because that flies in the face of his oath of office. He's there to execute the law, and if he has a problem, then he and like-minded district attorneys lobby the legislature to change the law. If the law is there, he has to enforce it. And so I agree with you.
Politically, she's not gonna do that. I think, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, look, DA Bragg is just starting his term of office. There's always, well, no, I mean, I'm not gonna comment on that. Well,
Great school.
well, I went to Columbia, so I may disagree, but, well, there you go. So, but I would say give the guy a chance, and
Well, we're looking forward to having you back, Vince, on the line. Don't change that dial. Listen to what happened here on WVOX. Don't change that dial.
you're always gonna get.
You see, it gets live, y'all. It gets live. Thanks, Vince, for calling in. Anybody else want to call in? 914-636-0110. So when we come back from break, it will be the final segment.
Discussion.
That's what I want to talk about. We'll get there.
Now he beat me to it.
Seeing what they told about Denzel Washington on
What happened?
Denzel Washington. He said he gave some comments. And then on the interesting. Thanks everybody for hanging in there on IG. I know it's not typical to have a long talk on IG, but we talking. And I think I'm gonna touch on the Voting Rights Act, maybe set that up for another time. I talked about that with Charles Rangel. I think that'd be something. Congressman Rangel, he's who looks like he's ready to come on the show.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken tells the president of Ukraine, our unity has never been more important.
Particularly as the country faces the possibility of renewed Russian aggression.
He says the Russians.
It seems like whenever we get close to some kind of breakthrough with COVID, we get some new distractions. This time with Ukraine and Russia. Oh, come on, man. How can we just can't focus?
How come we can't walk and shoot?
I mean, like, it's wild. Like, I'm thinking about all this money that was doled out to fight COVID. And the whole point was to build factories in the United States to manufacture PPE and test everything. And look at it's been done. It's just like, it's just amazing. Like, what happened?
We're just down flying it, those of them.
You know, I can't get over, and I'm gonna call this out to people, do a quick 3 seconds on it. You know, if you didn't pay your taxes in 3 years, you'd be hard by, yeah. And it's like, here's a city that hasn't done its taxes, let's say, in, at least 6, 20, 21, 7 years. 7 years, nothing. And it's like, come on. That'd be strange. And there's a conversation going on right now on the blogosphere in the city about how the tax rate is going to go up over 5% when you factor in the fees they're going to charge for sanitation and sewer. And I just find it amazing because we've always been paying toward a super fee.
That's 914.
The documents related to it are gone, vanished.
Finest funeral facility in all of Westchester County. We represent a fourth generation
How's it going?
of providing the highest level of personal service
And we get back on the mayor's corner.
throughout the county, and families have traveled the extra mile to call upon us during their time of need. Our spacious facilities and parking area provide
Frustrating is that you really can't
friends and loved
go
ones.
to New York City and enjoy yourself. You know?
Diligence, dedication, Graziano family
Have your kids vaccinated.
provides a
I can't even bring my kids to the zoo right.
This
You know,
gossip
it's
doesn't
just
sound
frustrating
funny.
because
Cops and
they
police
have the
don't
antibodies and
more
the
about
guidance
us.
said it was okay and they can't get a vaccine for a certain period of time. And all of a sudden, in a phone call today from a concerned parent that
Various options.
they now have to get their kids vaccinated, even though they just got over their second bout of COVID. And it's like, what is going on? Like, I'm like, wait a minute, they got the vaccine before, and then they got COVID again with this Omicron, so they're trying to figure out which. So right for parents to ask a lot of questions, and if there's a pill or some kind of alternative treatments, I think the CDC and Biden needs to just come clean on that and say, we're gonna give you this option. Well, yeah, that's the
And now
problem.
Thomas, the former mayor of Mount Vernon, on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back. You're listening to WVOX, a Whitney Global Media station. I'm Rich Thomas, the former mayor of Mount Vernon. You're listening to What Happened Here. Today's topic is the Manhattan District Attorney, and we're discussing safety. But we're here asking the question of what happened here on different issues from local to national to regional every Wednesday at noon on 1460 on your AM dial or worldwide on WVOX.com or streaming live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube on Mayor Rich Thomas platforms. The mission of this program, as I already mentioned, is to ask the question of what happened here with, and you fill in the blank. Today's topic is the Manhattan District Attorney and safety. Many of us live in Westchester, but we also work in New York City, taking the subways, riding the buses, going to restaurants, trying to enjoy the zoo as an example. But yet, you know, the concern as to if you're going to be safe rings true because so many things have happened with respect to crime over the past few years, especially with crime getting out of control. Earlier today, Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, Mayor Adams was on TV, calling for greater safety measures, which we support. And our guest on the show today is Charles Knapp. Charles Knapp is a former AUSA for the Eastern District, former Manhattan District Attorney, ADA under Robert Morgenthau, and served as Inspector General in the city of Mount Vernon. If you want to call in, this is our final segment. The call-in number is 914-636-0110. Now, before we went to break, we had a caller call in and raise some important points. Thank you, Vince, for calling in and pushing for an answer on whether or not the District Attorney in Manhattan should stay in office. But we know he's going to be given more time and a chance to demonstrate that he is going to uphold the law, and if he wants the laws changed, he is going to seek the laws to be changed through the legislature, and that's something that is important as we seek to develop new types of tolerances. For example, cannabis is now legal. There's a whole new industry opening up, so the criminalization related to cannabis has been rolled back, and now there's a whole process underway to allow that to work itself out through the different adjustments in law and how it relates to law enforcement. But the way the signal was sent from Manhattan District Attorney Bragg to those out there that want to cause harm against other people is, go ahead and do what you want to do. That was the signal and the message that people got, and rightfully so. Many people have to ask the question, what's going on here? What happened here? And here to answer that question is Charles Knapp. Charlie, what say you?
Well, DA Bragg has been in office less than 3 weeks, and he's on a learning curve, quite frankly. Some of the issues he raises are important, but let me just step back and put a little perspective. Crime is obviously a matter of perception. When I was at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, New York City had over 2,000 homicides a year. We are nowhere near those numbers. It doesn't matter, of course, if a loved one is the victim of a homicide. It's always one is too many. But the overall picture is New York is much, much safer than it was. There are upticks in crime, that's for sure. There are a lot of reasons for it. But there's also another point I'd like to make, and it's really something that the state has completely fallen down on ever since the first Governor Cuomo, when the what used to be called the mental institutions were closed down, as they should have been. Willowbrook and all those were horrendous. The idea was that there would be community housing for people who were released from mental institutions, as they were called, and they would get therapy and support that way. The state did not provide the money for that, and even if they had, no one wanted those houses to be in their communities, so these people wound up on the street, and now prisons have taken over the function to a certain extent for people who have mental illnesses, and that's not a law enforcement job. The answer to that will require the state to fund appropriate therapeutic entities for that.
I just want to jump in on that because, I agree that, there should be a form of care for people that are struggling with mental illness. But when I look at the budgets and I see that there's $3 billion allocated by New York City to deal with the homeless crisis, 3 billion with a capital B. That's more money than many third world countries have, from their, gross domestic product. So it's kind of like, how come 3 billion is not enough for New York City to figure out how to create these alternative destinations for people with mental illness or homeless issues? How come 3 billion is not enough? And that's where, I get real cynical, having served as mayor, seeking answers on what's going on with Mount Vernon's money, and seeing that, if you go online to the New York State Controller's office, you go to their website, they have something called Open Book, and I'm pulling up the people online that are watching. You can see that in 2016, the city of Mount Vernon has no financial data published whatsoever. They submitted nothing. The same thing goes for 2017, 18, 19, 20, and 21, as you already know. So for just about 7 years, there's been no financial data coming out of Mount Vernon. Meanwhile, it's just confusion and chaos, because for some reason the state controller, state AG, doesn't want to look at these issues. But meanwhile, we're being told to look at the Voting Rights Act and get worked up over that. We're being told to get worked up over, and rightfully get worked up over the crime situation in New York City. But, in our own backyard, we have some major issues that we will dive into, not on this show, but I wanted to share that with everyone, because it's like, when you really look at the issues that really matter, you get distracted by something else. And that's why we have this show, What Happened Here, to kind of unpack the issues and ask the questions of what happened here, why. But going back to District Attorney Bragg, what's the ultimate resolution? It's a learning curve. He has some time to kind of regroup. It's only been 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks, not even. And now, it looks like he's getting some support from former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara, who has a strong track record of going after high-profile crimes, including, I believe he was going after Trump at one point. Is that right, or am I mistaken?
Barada?
Yeah, but no, I don't think so. He was.
No, well, the Southern District was looking into certain matters. Not much apparently came of it. But you had raised the January 6th hearings in Congress and the response from the Department of Justice. And I just like to say that you have to remember Congress's job is very different. This was just some sort of mostly peaceful demonstration. It wasn't an insurrection, and you get into all the politics of it. And then suddenly they're now conspiracy for sedition, and insurrection is now being prosecuted with respect to some of the Proud Boys. That's the way it should be. You're not supposed to hear anything about criminal investigations until there's an indictment. what Congress is doing is very different. That's politics. That's theoretically to figure out what laws, if any, need to be passed to address the issues of January 6th. So they're coming at the facts from very different directions. And just as an aside, the news this morning from the state attorney general, Letitia James, tweeting out relating to her civil case against Donald Trump. I'm not so sure that that is a wise thing to do because, again, it's an ongoing investigation. It's a civil matter, sure, but it's a state investigation, and it should not be made public until they have something to say. And if people are otherwise interested, they can do the legwork and go look at the court filings. I'm just not convinced that publicizing these things at this point is helpful because it raises people's expectations. And if there's nothing at the end of the day, that makes it worse.
Politics, politics, politics. I hope the AG looks into the finances of the city of Mount Vernon to give us some answers, but that's for another show. This was a great show with Charlie Knapp. You listen to What Happened Here on WVOX and Whitney Global Media Station. I'm Rich Thomas, former mayor of Mount Vernon. Looking forward to seeing you next week, Wednesday at noon, when we pick up the question of what happened here with. Wait to see our next guest. You're going to love the topic. Everybody stay healthy, stay happy. God bless. Bye.